explain it to you how it works down here. Every time it rains, every time, we get flash flood watches and we get flash flood warnings. And that is part of our life. We live that way all the time. So we all know what to do down here. We hunker down where we are because everything is built higher than the floodplains. You know, the average floods, even the bigger floods, like the flood of 87, okay? Another hard lesson we learned in the flood of 1987 on the Guadalupe River was you do not evacuate the camps. You get kids to higher ground. Because the kids in 1987 were killed when their school buses were washed away, because all our roads are low-lying roads near the river. They all have low water crossings. The bridges that cross the river are 10 to 12 feet in many places. As we know, the water was over 30 feet high. A lot of the people that got washed away, that survived, that died, they were washed away in their cars evacuating. That's what they were doing. Why do you think dozens of cars were going down the river honking with people screaming? Why? Because they tried to evacuate, which is the wrong thing to do down here. You don't evacuate for flash floods. You can't. What you do is you climb a hill, you climb a tree, you run, you climb on top of a building, you go uphill, you go higher. You don't get in your car and go on low-lying roads with forest lining both sides. I'm sure a lot of the people who died were tourists who didn't know any better. And they thought, oh, here's what we do if we're worried about the storm, which a lot of people did. Hundreds and hundreds of people worried about the storm. They realized it was raining a lot harder than anyone said was going to rain that night. When everybody went to bed, we were told. The weather was just saying it was going to be a few inches, like no big deal. No one said 20 inches of rain was going to hit. Not until the dead middle of the night. On social media posts, on the National Weather Service site. How the hell is anybody supposed to know that meant, oh, they're saying here's what the weather forecast is going to be. They're saying it's okay. It wasn't until the middle of the night that even the weather forecast changed. And the online posts started going up. Now, I don't know about you guys and all your high and freaking mighty judginess, but I'm sorry that you guys wake up every single hour and check the weather to see if the weather forecast has changed while you're asleep. Most people don't do that. Most people sleep at 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the morning. The push alerts that went out in the area, the problem with that is you have to be in the local white pages to get them. And when you get them, like the family who was washed away in the red house, right? They got the push alert. They did, and they responded to it immediately. The father got the push alert. He looked out the front door of their house that had never flooded. He had lived in that neighborhood his whole life. It had never flooded in that neighborhood ever before. He got the push alert and he looked out the front door. There was just a little water running down the sides of the street like is normal for every place in the world during a rainstorm. He went ahead and woke up his wife and daughters despite that. And said, hey, we got a life-threatening flash flood alert on our phone. Like, we need to get up and, get moving, get out of here. And they got up out of bed, and by the time they got to their living room, they had feet of water outside. And their house went off its foundation and took off. And they just cowered. They just climbed in the front room to the highest point near a window, and they just cried and prayed as their house flowed downriver. Luckily, their house didn't break apart. I mean, it did. In some places, it broke partially apart. Trees came inside it. But they were fortunate enough to make it to the morning until the fire department rescue came and got them out of there. There was no sirens to tell people, hey, wake up. Something has changed since you went to bed last night. Something big has changed. The people who were up and watching the river with their own eyes, just uncomfortable. They weren't getting alerts saying you need to evacuate, you need to leave, nothing. They were just on their own, waking up at their houses that live along the river, people who have lived there a long time, saying, sure is a lot of rain, more than what I thought we were supposed to get. And they were watching the water. They were watching the river. And as soon as they saw, oh, the river's starting to break its banks a little, maybe we should head out, they ran to grab keys and things like that. And story after story is by the time they got their keys and got out the door, the river was already taking everything. It was taking their cars away. They had nowhere to go. So please, stop saying, why didn't people evacuate ahead of time? If we evacuated our homes every time we got one of these alerts, A, we would live in hilltop encampments and no one would ever come down. B, like, you don't go drive on the roads here when there's flash flood alerts. That's the last thing you do. I mean, they even ended the stupid freaking 4 a.m. post that came too late to save anybody. By the time those life-threatening flash flood alerts went out online quietly in the dead of night with no calls, no push alerts, no other notifications, no sirens, nothing. By the time those went out, people were already dying. The girls at Camp Mystic were already swept away. So yeah, we were warned, right? We were warned. They put some stuff online in the dead middle of the night when everybody was asleep, right? Except for half the people were already washed away when those went out. The verbiage, if you look on those sites, to go look at the sites and look at how many warnings we get, look at the times those really went out, look at the verbiage in them. Does anything in that verbiage say this is going to be way worse than normal until it was too late, until the too late ones were going out? Right? And I just, living in this area, it is just so infuriating to see people online judging not only all the locals, but all the vacationers. Like, you understand that river, those cabins are rented by vacationers a lot. Tourists, people who have no idea what this area is like. It's just beautiful. They see the beautiful Airbnb pictures. They see the beautiful cabins. They see the beautiful river. All the recreational opportunities the river provides. And they say, hey, I'm going to go. This looks like a wonderful vacation. How the hell was anybody supposed to know? Even the governor on TV, the Kerrville mayor, everybody says no one had any idea a 30-foot wall of water was coming down that river that night, unlike anything we had ever seen. Yes, we've had other floods. We sure have, and they've been bad ones. Not like this. Not like this. No one could have known what was coming. We did not know. We didn't know to evacuate. Where to? Where would you go? You would just end up like the hundreds of people in those cars honking and screaming as they were washed away down the river. That was what was waking a lot of the people up that lived. Was the first people who got caught in the front end of that trying to evacuate because they recognized we got to get out of here. When all this ends, go drive River Road if you want to judge people. Go drive that road. See what their evacuation route would have been. And you tell me. You know? Am I saying it's the officials' fault? Most of them had no warning and didn't know either. The only thing that could have saved lives, honestly, was if we had had the siren system along the river that was triggered by river flood gauges, where people knew this isn't the normal flash flood watch, this isn't the normal flash flood warning, something's different, they're setting off sirens this time, that means a wall of water is coming down the river now. And the people had had 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 2 minutes warning, 5 minutes warning to run for the hilltops nearby, to just climb to high ground. If there had been a siren system in place, I'm sure Camp Mystic would have had a siren drill that the girls did, that camp, all the camps along the river would have had siren drills where it was like, as soon as the flood sirens go off, everybody does this. I'm sure they all would have been doing that and incorporated that into their stuff, where they could all run to the hilltops and get the girls to high ground. Even at Camp Mystic, people are like, why didn't they do this and why didn't they do that? Because everything was said, all was well. Even the RV park owner said she woke up at 2:30 and the rain was just pounding, and so she went down to the river and she watched the river with her own eyes. her own eyes. And nothing was wrong. And then she called the sheriff and she said, hey, is there something wrong? Is there any risk of high water? Is there a problem? And they said, no, everything seems fine. We have no information on that. I'm sure the camps along the river called. And we're told the same thing, probably. Obviously Camp Mystic's director was watching the river. Obviously. He went down to the river. He went down there in his Suburban as soon as he realized that the river was rising. So obviously he was up. He had gotten he had checked the weather. He was watching the river. And as soon as he noticed, after decades and decades and decades that he's run that camp and knew that river so intimately, had been through so many similar thunderstorms going on that river, where the camp had never flooded. But he was watching. He was, because that's how he died. As soon as he realized the water was rising, he jumped in his Suburban, drove down to the girls' cabin, was trying to save their lives. He was trying to get them out of there to high ground. And he lost his life being washed away too. And so I wish people online would stop being so judgy and stop saying, why didn't they evacuate? Well, why don't you learn a little bit about the area before you say that? What, how, where would they go to evacuate? They were trying to. That's what everyone was trying to do. Pretty much everyone who died, everyone who lived, that's their story. They were trying to evacuate, or they had no warning at all. They were asleep. They were from out of town. They're not in the local white pages. The push alerts didn't go to them. The cell phone reception all along the river is terrible. Half the places you go, there's giant vertical rock walls. There's all these, there's all these land features that block it. So most people don't have cell phone signal down by the river. So even if there were push alerts on the phone, only sporadic people are going to get them, even if they expanded it to a full out system that didn't depend on the local white pages to warn people and just shot out an alert. Half the people at the river wouldn't have gotten it. All week, that wasn't the forecast, In fact, all the stories down here about how the river was going to be so dry for recreation on the 4th of July. The water levels were going to be low. It was going to be running low. It was, it was a beautiful day. Some of the places that got flooded, it never rained where they were. So they didn't even have that. When they went to bed, that's not what the forecast was saying was going to happen. When you camp, you tend to go to bed at dark time, about 9 o'clock. Things didn't start coming out till 11 p.m. saying, hey, the forecast has changed. And that was just going out quietly online in the night. Comfort, I applaud the town of Comfort. I really do. They put in a siren system. And they don't use it ever. They don't use it for all these other flash flood warnings and the normal ones where but as soon as they realized this time is different, they set off that siren system and they had 0 deaths. Because the sirens told people this time something's different. This isn't the normal routine. And I'm just, as a local, it is heartbreaking. It is infuriating that everyone is blaming. It's like saying, oh, well, people live in Florida. They posted online at 1:30 in the morning a 30-foot tsunami was coming. Why didn't people evacuate? Right? Because everybody's just awake checking online in this idealistic little world in which everybody stays up all night and diligently watches the forecast that wasn't anything close to that when they went to bed that night. And the people who did, it didn't help them. They got washed away too. Where the hell are you going to go? So I really wish that people would stop with the why didn't they evacuate? Why didn't they this? Why didn't they? Because they didn't know. They had no warning. And yeah, news. Go ahead, media. Keep putting this timeline of these crappy, stupid little flood alerts and crap that were on there with stupid minimal verbiage and say everybody should have known. Y'all send those to us all the time. We get them all the time. Constantly. Nonstop. Those same alerts. The same verbiage. It even ended with turn around. Don't drown. How the hell would people evacuate when even the life-threatening, dangerous, life-threatening thing ends with turn around, don't drown, because all the low water crossings make it impossible to evacuate. So why don't all you people who are saying that? Why don't you come down here when this is over? You go down to the river. You go ahead, just have an elevation meter on your phone. Why don't you do that? Just put that elevation meter on your phone. Now, wait until the dead middle of night. I want you to wait till after 11 o'clock at night when it's pitch black, no street lights, those tiny little one lane in and out, low water crossing, low bridge ridden roads. They're the only way out. And I want you to pretend that you were super diligent, like you say you would be. And you realize, hey, the weather forecast is changing because I've stayed up all night to watch the weather and it's changing. So let's do a mock evacuation. And watch the elevation meter on your phone as you navigate that long and windy, crisscrossy over the river road. And you show me your superhuman ability to make it out of there. Do you think that thousands of people would have gone in that river that night? And thousands did. Thousands went into the river. Thousands. They had to rescue 850 people. Rescue them. That's not counting all the thousands that went in and managed to get out on their own. We're talking about the 850 that couldn't get out on their own that were rescued. Had to be rescued because they couldn't get out. Let's talk about what it looks to be about 300 people dead. Huh? If there had been adequate warning, if anyone had known, if there had been the ability to escape in any way, shape, or form, do you really think thousands of people would have gone into that water like that? So here I am, because I cannot listen to the stupidity anymore of the victim blaming. Texans will be okay. Everybody's doing everything they can. The help is so appreciated. Thank you so much to everyone who's coming and helping everyone down here. And ugly crying. But just thank you to the people who have come from everywhere. Thank you to all those who are doing the right thing and expressing your love and praying and doing what you can from where you are, donating to people who lost everything. I was fortunate. I live in Medina County, and the area where my house wasn't affected. A couple weeks before, we had a little flood here where I had a couple feet of water around my house out of nowhere, and I was home. I didn't get any. I think I got a life-threatening flash flood alert, but there's, I live between two low water crossings, so, and in a giant flat area, so I just watched and knew if I saw the water rising fast, I was going to throw the dogs on the roof, and then I was going to climb up after them, and me and the dogs and the angry cats, and we were just going to sit on the roof and wait for rescue if we needed to, because there's nowhere to go. By the time you know something is wrong, there's nowhere to go. I think we definitely need a siren system down the whole length of the river that's triggered by river flood gauges, where with the river flood gauges, as they register the first rise in the river upstream, they start setting off the sirens downstream, letting people know that this is not just the weather service people saying don't, just hunker down, stay in your house, there's a flash flood, don't go to low areas, don't go to The water crossings stay off the roads, normal thing that they normally have all the time, but more of a warning. A siren system where people know that when it goes off, that the river flood gauges are saying water's coming and get to high ground now. I think that it should be important when everyone checks in at the campsites and campgrounds that once the siren system goes in, that they're informed at their check-in, hey, there's a siren system. It is, not for tornadoes. It is for floods. If you hear the siren system alarm, your high ground that is above 30 feet elevation is there, and point. Say that hilltop over there, that's where you're going to run. Don't get in your cars and try and drive out of here like the hundreds of people who got caught in their cars trying to do that. There's your high ground. There's the hilltop you run to. If you hear that siren, you have seconds to minutes. Run for it. Grab, your pets and your kids and run. Grab the living things with you and run to that hilltop. Run if you hear the siren. Because then people would have evacuated to that hilltop. They would have run to their high ground. The girls in those cabins would have heard that siren, and the counselors would have snatched up those little girls out of bed and ran up the hill, and they would have all lived. Is it anybody's fault? Should we point fingers and say it's someone's fault that there were no sirens on that area? No, because from what I understand, it was just a cluster about doing that between the officials and the arguments and the attempts to do it and the denied things and the back and forth. And then of course, because we constantly get bombarded with flash flood warnings, I think locals were worried these sirens are going to be going off all the time, just like the flash flood warnings, and just going to annoy everybody to death and wake everybody up all the time for no reason. Gonna be nothing burgers like our normal flash flood watches and warnings turn out to be. But it wasn't. This time it wasn't. It was something that people who grew up on the river, their grandmas never saw, their grandpas never saw, their great-grandparents never saw. They were born and raised there. They've never seen a wall of water like that. Not like that. There's been other floods, but not like that. But the same sort of thing in smaller floods happened in years past. So people built up even higher than those past ones because okay, well, this is the highest that it gets, so let's go up here. And this is the highest that it gets, so let's build here. Still breaks my heart in 2013. I think about the cabins that were swept off the banks of the river near Wimberley. There's still littles we never found, little bitties, that are still out there somewhere that we've never found from that. There's still a child from the 1987 flood that we never found. But please stop blaming the people who lost their lives, lost everything. Stop saying that these little obscure bulletins in the night that no one ever got, that were so drastically different from the weather forecast that had been in place before they went to bed that night. Just stop. It's not the way it was. It's not the way it was. And we can need all the help. We could use all the help we can get. And if you've been online judging, maybe you just didn't understand what it's like here. But, just please. I hope you understand now. And I hope you can stop judging the victims and victim blaming. If you only understood what it was to live here, and the verbiage of those warnings just being the same verbiage that we always see in the warnings that did go out saying life-threatening flash flood, people were already getting washed away by the time those even went out. And most people couldn't even got them where they were. And everybody tried once they knew something was different. Camp director at Camp Mystic died knowing that, the river's rising, I'm going to get in the car and go grab the little girls out. Because every time anything like this had ever happened before, you had time to move to high ground. And this time, people just didn't even have the time. It was too fast. It was the dead of night. It was pitch black. All the electricity had gone out from the thunderstorm a couple hours before. No one could see anything. The moon was covered by the clouds. It was pitch black outside. No one could see how the water, no one could see where it was coming from. Floods backflow, which means they flow down like this, but around the sides. It makes like a semicircle with like a gap between the river and the backflow, and people end up thinking they're getting away to higher ground, and then they get caught between that backflow and the main flood and get flooded into place. There are people on those low roads that all of a sudden, from the forest surrounding the roads, the water came. People asleep in their beds who didn't get any push alerts, didn't get alarms, they were just asleep, thinking that they lived far enough away from the river where they would never flood no matter what. And they just woke up to water rushing into their home in the pitch black. All the furniture's floating, every object in the house is floating, everything's crashing, banging, houses are coming off the foundations. Like, so many people never had a chance. They had no warning. When we say people had no warning, we don't mean the National Weather Service didn't put obscure bulletins up in the middle of the freaking night online. We popped some things up on our social media sites. You guys should have known. Yeah. People hadn't been asleep in the dead middle of the night when all those went up. People had no chance to evacuate. They had no forewarning this was going to be any different than any other storm. To all those who have been good to the people down here, who have helped, who have sent well wishes, we are forever grateful for all of that. But to those out there just judging and blaming and finger pointing at the victims, I hope you understand now better that the reality of what it was and what it is. No one had a chance. It was pure luck of the draw who lived and who died that night. It was Mother Nature at her fiercest. It was a mile wide, 30-foot high deluge, unlike anything we've ever seen. Bigger than the biggest floods we had ever seen before. It took things that had sat untouched along that river for over 100 years. They went this time with no warning. It was not an adequate warning. There was no effective warning. Some people got lucky enough to get some warnings just in time to wake up and realize they had nowhere to go because the water was there. If we had had a siren system on the river, triggered by river flood gauges that just auto set off down the river when the river flood gauges said a life-threatening surge of water is coming, people would have had a chance. Comfort, Texas had that, 0 fatalities. And I hope that moving forward we learn this time. I even made a petition on change.org. I called it Install a Camp Mystic Memorial Siren System along the river. So that maybe we couldn't get people to high ground in time this time. But we should have no excuse at this point. No excuse to not get one in now. I'm so sorry for everyone who lost family. And all the parents, not only the Camp Mystic parents, but there's so many other kids lost up and down that river that night. Excitedly looking forward to fireworks. In their tents. In the cars trying to flee and evacuate with their families. In their RVs and their cabins.
And I'm so sorry. We have to do better. We have to honor those kids' memories if nothing else by making sure this never, ever happens again. That there is some warning that wakes people up, that lets them know this flash flood is different. It's not hunker down, avoid the roads, avoid low water crossings. This flash flood is coming, like the river's coming. Never again, guys. We can't ever let this happen again. If there's nothing else we can do to honor the memories, we have to at least do that. And please just stop. Stop blaming the victims. That's all I'm asking. As a local down here, have a heart, have a soul, understand what they went through and how little actual, real, and meaningful warning that they had. And even those who did, and who were ready, and who tried to flee, they were taken too. It's easy to judge when you don't know what it's like. Everybody be safe. Advocate if you have flash flood prone areas and you don't have sirens in your area, but you have those rivers. It hasn't happened yet. Someday it will. Someday it will. All over the country, people should advocate for sirens, warning sirens along their waterways that are prone to flash floods this way, that have a lot of people that utilize those waterways. Maybe we can save lives not just here, but all over the country, all over the world even. People paying attention and to what has happened here and making sure that there are sirens that are not set off willy-nilly every flash flood alert, but only when the river's truly rising. That's all I can say. And look for all the heroes. Thank God for all the heroes. Thank God for all the helpers. And just please don't be so quick to judge others in situations like this. You have no idea what they went through.